In this session, we discuss what it means to be a supervisor, starting at square one and creating a safety net for supervisees. Welcome to the AFTA podcast. I'm Naveed Zamani, and I'm your host. In this session, I'm excited to be speaking with Connie Cornwell. Connie has over 40 years' experience as a licensed marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor and approved LMFT and LPC supervisor. She is clinical fellow and approved supervisor with the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy and member of American Family Therapy Academy. She is a senior supervisor at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center Family Studies Center in the Department of Family and Community Medicine, where she trains and supervises interns, psychiatry, and family medicine residents. Thank you so much for joining us, Connie. I'm very excited to have you. And this season, I'm asking interviewees for a story about a time in this context, in your supervisory practice, where you feel that you failed and what you learned. And I'll turn to you.
Thank you for inviting me, Navid. And also thank you for doing all these podcasts. This is a great contribution you're making. A time I failed as a supervisor, I may have failed and didn't know I failed, because sometimes supervisees don't always let you know. And then yet there's times when I kind of look at, am I providing this supervisee or intern that I'm supervising with everything they need to be a competent therapist? And I'm kind of questioning that a lot. Am I providing what they need? Am I helping them to understand how to integrate theories? Am I helping them to be able to sit in front of whatever comes at them? Because, in couples and family therapy, we see difficult cases. And I want to make sure that they're prepared. So I'm sure to the degree I did that successfully, I don't know. One of the difficulties being a supervisor, as long as I also felt the kind of the responsibility of being a gatekeeper and to our profession. And I am thinking about a time where I really had to, after working with an intern for a while, she just wasn't getting it. She had come from a teaching background, and she thought therapy was lecturing, advising, teaching. And I failed at moving her off that. I just couldn't move her from that frame. And after many attempts, and she was a graduate student from a different university, and it was difficult, but I had to sit with her and explain why I thought maybe this profession wasn't the right fit for her.
Oh, that must have been difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. And at the same time, I was trying to point to her that, you can use some of these counseling skills in a different arena. But, to be a couples and family therapist, you're not lecturing, teaching, and advising. That's just not therapy. And so things like that have come up with interns. And, I'm trying to think about how to have these conversations. Now, what happened is that this particular intern didn't faze her at all, because apparently she thought she was doing it right. And so that created difficulty in our relationship. Fortunately, it was the end of her internship. But I always wondered what happened to her, because what she was trying to do just wasn't therapy.
Yeah. It sounds like a really challenging dynamic where I guess I just want to say I really kind of resonate with or connect with this gatekeeper role. I think of it as well in my positions. And that as you're kind of trying to support her and kind of maybe expanding or kind of considering her practice as it comes to family therapy, being met with kind of an assuredness or a confidence in what they're doing that's not really responsive to what you're sharing.
Right. So I'm sure she went ahead and graduated, and I I don't know what happened to her. My assumption is if she went out and practiced therapy, I have a sense she probably did not keep her clients long
Mm,
because I think, people can advise and teach and tell people how to be, but they discover those things don't work.
right.
Yeah. So I sometimes feel like, I have a responsibility to be a gatekeeper, but then I also kind of think the public itself may be even a better gatekeeper because they're going to either, not want to do therapy with that therapist or they're going to, find someone else.
Yeah, it's such a challenging situation too because let me know if this is fair. I always kind of equate some of the training to to me has felt like practicing or like learning and practicing music. Like there's a
Yes.
relationship with theory and then what it takes to practice. The only challenge is that like the piano doesn't get upset if I do something. It doesn't really react to me.
Right.
So
You're
the
going to hit
pub,
a wrong note.
yeah, that's about it. I won't hurt it or harm it in any particular way.
Right. Right.
I guess I wonder, and Connie, I want to make sure I'm kind of like in line with what you want to talk about. So if I ask a question, especially this question, you're not like, and maybe it's not the path you're interested in, please, that's totally fine. But I wonder, because you've done supervision for some time now,
A long time. Yes.
what have you noticed kind of change in the landscape of supervision over your kind of time and experience, if that's an okay question?
It's a great question. Uh, One of the things I've noticed over time, and I'm comparing myself to when I was doing graduate work in the 70s, and that's a long time ago. And that was at the peak of family and couples therapy. I mean,
Hmm.
we thought we were the coolest kids on the block because we were
And
all
you
enthused.
were,
Yeah, well, yeah, of
you
course we
still
were.
are.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that I've noticed that the quality of training I received was pretty intense and excellent training, and I got excellent supervision. But I've noticed in some ways, some of the training is not where it was for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, it's not quite as rigorous because I did my training with Harry Galician, Linda Bell, George Pulliam, Paul Dell, all those people who were part of the Galveston Family Institute at that
Oh,
time. And we were doing tons of mirror work, either in front of that mirror or you were behind that mirror. And Harry was talking to you about the case we were observing.
yeah.
And that was so valuable. And some of the training programs don't really offer that. And so by the time I get these interns to do their internship. They've had little or no experience seeing a family or a couple. So I'm literally having to start at square one. What's of essence to me as a supervisor is that they can at least think systems. If you can't think systems or dance in the systems paradigm, I don't think you can do what we do in couples and family work.
Right.
So hopefully they come in with that. And we do a lot of interviewing before we take on new interns. But when I ask the question, how much experience have you had sitting with a real family or couple? It's been very little. And I guess I'm kind of sad about that
Hmm.
because I think the training has it, I'm only speaking from my experience of the universities that we relate to, but it doesn't seem quite as vigorous as when I was in training.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that creates then for me as a supervisor needing to really sometimes start at square one with an intern, you know,
Yeah.
and build their confidence and do a lot of hand holding sometimes. And just trying to help them you know, learn that, hey, we have all these beautiful theories and models and techniques, and I want to support you in understanding them. You don't have to be an expert in all of them, but I want you to understand them so you can draw from them and integrate them.
Hmm.
You know, one of my favorite supervisors, and let me say this, I have been so privileged and grateful to have such great supervision, and I am standing on their shoulders. And I hear them still in my head. So I'm taking their wisdom and I'm simply passing it on to the next generation and adding some things I've learned along the way as, also. And I had to laugh the other day. An intern said to me, she says, I was in the session and I heard you say, slow down. Good.
Lovely.
You know,
Lovely.
because that's what it's about. So, I probably came from a great deal of privilege around the people I got to work with and train with. And I think for me now, I have to adjust that dial. Some interns come in and they're older, they're mature, they really have already connected the dots. But then there's other interns coming in the door. I really have to spend time helping them connect those dots.
Hmm.
And particularly if somebody comes in and sits in front of me and says, "Well, I just want to do Bowenian," and I have to look at them and say, "Well, I don't think that's going to work with our families." We have very tough, difficult families. You can use that genogram, but you're going to have some more skills in your bag, you know? So, I don't know how other people feel in the profession who are in my generation, but it feels like the training hasn't been as vigorous. Some of it has to do with licensure and expectations and people wanting to get through the program as quick as possible. Whereas I came from a generation where we had institutes that
Right.
people would go to. Where I lived between Houston and Galveston, there was a Galveston Family Institute and a Houston Family Institute. And so people were getting extra training going to those institutes.
Yeah.
And you really, you spent like a year or two often embedded and you were seeing people in front of that mirror, behind that mirror. And I don't think you can beat that. I think it's real important, I find. Um, I'm training and have trained since we joined UT Southwestern in 2004, probably 150, 200 psychiatry residents. And these are residents where we're an elective, and they get so turned on about family and couples therapy. And when they end their elective with me, they say, "I want more training. Where can I go?" And I'm saying, "There's no institute in Texas I can refer you to.
Uh,
How do you feel about going back and getting a master's,
mm,
and learning how to do couples and family, which, these people have already gone through residency. I don't think they want to do that.
right.
But what they do tell me is that they're now able to bring in a family, bring in that patient's family and sit with them. They know how to sit with them. They know how to ask them questions, and they see the value of bringing in that family. And so, if we've accomplished that, that feels good.
Right. Yeah, I'm so appreciating what you're saying here, Connie, because so much what you're saying I've experienced. I don't have like the benefit of kind of time and frame of reference, but I
Hmm.
guess just kind of hanging around folks at AFTA, I've kind of got a sense
Yeah.
that the training, the rigor in training and maybe the focus has
Hmm.
shifted considerably.
Yeah.
Um, I feel fortunate that I was in a program that had the mirror work, but I agree that like a lot of most schools, from my experience, don't have the mirror. There's a lot of
Hmm.
online context nowadays.
Hmm.
Where, in my experience with some of the online context, a lot of the self-of-therapist work seems to be quite lacking. Um,
Yes, in some cases, yeah.
yeah, and it seems like
Yeah.
maybe kind of the commercialization of training. It's more about kind of getting folks through these degrees than like a
Yeah.
training rigor.
Yeah, Nevada, I think you're completely correct about that. Um, and the self of the therapist as a supervisor is one of the things that's top of my list.
Right.
Because you see what happens, and I tell beginning interns this, I say, you don't know what's going to show up in terms of self of the therapist until you're in the room.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
You may think you've done your work, but you won't know. If you're sitting with a family and all of a sudden you're really struggling with a dad because maybe you have your own issues with your own dad, or mom issues or something, you really, you think you know, but you never really know until you sit in the room with a couple or a family and then, stuff shows up, you know? And it's on the plate all the time. And, I meet with these interns for an hour a week, and self of the therapist is there. Fortunately, the interns I have right now are so open to looking at it, and they want to know their blind spots,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, because it's not, and I tell them, when I was trained with Linda Bell, we called it interface, and I love that term because it's not about good or bad. It's just that if you're unaware, it can kind of create problems for you as a therapist. But as long as you're aware, you can learn then to make even use of it.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm really drawn into this piece because I guess in the context of how we're talking about maybe the shift in the training programs and maybe sometimes, I don't know, like almost the absence of some of the self of the therapist work, I'm kind of appreciating this thing that you're saying where, well, when folks come in, sometimes I'm having to start at square one, where I'm like kind of having to build
Mhm.
confidence and do some hand
Yes.
holding. And I guess I'm curious about that square one. Because, in my own context, 'cause I also supervise MFT
Ah,
trainees and associates,
yeah.
and it's in a nonprofit community agency setting working with
Hmm.
Middle Eastern refugees who are experiencing
Ah,
domestic violence. So it's also like in
great.
a bilingual or multilingual context.
Yes.
And there's something about domestic violence, maybe the refugee work, I don't know, that kind of demands a certain level of confidence
Hmm.
and then like a sense of I don't know how to say it, like maybe a sense of adequacy that can kind of get kind of poked and prodded at by just either the crises that are coming up or the clinical
Yes.
work itself. So anyways,
Yes.
all this to say is like I'm really curious about where do you start when folks are coming in without years of the graduate program actually doing that work for them, and then you're kind of having to do all of
Okay.
it.
Well, how I start is I ask them to not do therapy.
What do you mean by that?
Do therapy. Well, let me explain.
Yeah, yeah.
Beginning therapists want to go in and they want to try out immediately the thing they've learned, the technique or the model they've learned, and they want to throw it on top of the family or the couple, and that just doesn't work, and then they get discouraged. So I have this kind of running joke. I'll say, well, I don't want you to do therapy for now. While you're just beginning, I want you to do only one thing is that I want you to practice being 100% present with the people
Mm,
across from you.
mm,
That's all I'm asking of you right now. That's all I want you to do. And I said, if you will trust me in this, then you will begin to listen deeper. And then you may begin to even formulate better hypotheses. You may begin to even ask better questions. But I don't want you to go in there with a do list and do therapy. I want you to practice sincerely the art of being totally present. The interns who have taken my advice always come back and say, that was the best thing you told me to do.
mm.
It takes away that anxiety of having to perform because they think they have to perform and fix. We're trying to get them out of that mode of thinking,
Yeah.
but it comes with the territory. So I'm trying to break that down and help them by just being present. And I said, and being present and being an attuned, deep listener, do you know how validating that is for people?
Mm,
Because people will tell you, no one really hears or listens to me. And by you doing that, you're building rapport. You're beginning to watch and observe things, not just the verbal, but also the nonverbal. And I said, you'll be amazed also what you'll remember, because I don't let them take notes. Now they can do geniograms, but I won't let them take notes. And they'll look at me and I'll say, don't worry. I guarantee if you're totally present, you will remember everything that has occurred in that room.
mm.
So that's one of the things I encourage them to do at the very beginning.
Yeah, I think sometimes the most beautifully complex things are sound the most simple because there's something about just being present that on the surface maybe
Mhm.
seems simple, but it's probably one of the hardest things we can do, especially in maybe our contemporary
Yes.
cultural moment where just kind of having phones off and just paying attention to the thing in front of you is a big
Yeah.
challenge.
Oh, yeah. And if you go back to the core competencies, one of the things that clients have told us is they really like their therapist because she really or he really listens,
Right.
you know? And I tell them, the other tool that they can pull out always if they're really stuck is to simply validate the people you're sitting in front of you and give them support and validate them by looking for those strengths. Don't focus on the detriment so much. They know the detriment. We need to help focus on the strengths and the competencies we see in front of us.
So if I can ask about this piece around, because something I'm hearing you say is that as uh, kind of beginning therapists come into the work, they're kind of hit with the expectations of fixing and doing and all this
Yeah,
stuff, which then kind of inadvertently plays back into how they're maybe feeling about themselves or their
right.
confidence.
Oh yeah, because then it doesn't work, and then they're devastated. They're like,
Yeah. And one of the challenges I've had with confidence, and forgive me, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, so I might
oh, please do.
bumble through this, is kind of encouraging or inviting or even talking about confidence seems to
Yes,
work against confidence,
yes,
if that makes sense.
yes.
And I wonder, like, as I say that, like, what comes up for you, or how, I mean, if it's something that feels relevant for you, how you've managed that.
Well, probably in several different ways. Sometimes I simply am curious about them, and I ask, how's it feel to be in the room? How are you feeling? Are any fears coming up? And that's okay. Please do not fear about failing or screwing things up. You really can't because we always can put in a correction. So don't worry about that. So I'm trying to give them permission to take risk in that room because if they don't learn how to confront and deal with things, you can't move therapy forward. So I'm giving them permission to fail. At the same time, saying there's no failure because you learn from everything that happens in
Mm,
that room and the feedback you're getting from your clients. So then I'm kind of measuring their fear level and confidence does sometimes come into the room and we'll talk about it. Recently, I had an intern, she's kind of in her second semester and she's young looking and she's struggling a little with confidence. And we broke
mm,
it down. And she says, "I don't know if I feel that confident." And she says, "I don't. I'm a little afraid. I hear you, but I guess I haven't been really confronting things I need to in the room." And I said, "Well, yeah, I want to support you in learning how to do that. How to do soft confrontations. There's a skill to that. That's the art of therapy, actually." And we talked about the case. And then I looked at her. I said, "Would it help? What do you think about putting your hair?" Because what she showed me her videotape, and her hair is hanging down, and she is twirling her hair in the session. And I said, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm twirling my hair." And I said, "Well, okay, you're seeing yourself. What message are you giving?" "Oh, I'm not very competent." And I said, "Yeah,
uh,
they may see that because it showed on the video she was sharing with me." And I said, "Well, I got a suggestion. Why don't you put your hair up in a bun? That might help you take on that professional kind of stance and it'll keep you from twirling your hair." And
mm.
so she started doing that. And I checked in with her and she says, "Yeah, I think that helps." She didn't even realize she was twirling her hair in session.
Right. I imagine that's such a lovely, or maybe not even lovely, like important feature of a supervisor is just to kind of be in notice things like that.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Very important. It's because I have them bring in their videotapes, and I'm also available to do live supervision and sit in on their cases too. But it just she was so unconscious act, and then she said to me, she says, "Well, I guess that has been pointed out by her dad or something that you do that." So
Mm. So if I can ask, okay, so let me, if this is an okay question, because as you were kind of sharing about that, I was wondering about how you manage or engage with kind of like power dynamics in the relationship. Because I'm thinking about like, well, I work with a primarily like female identifying group of therapists, and
right,
I identify male. I present male. Those power dynamics are very
right.
present, I think, in our relationship. And I don't know that I would ever feel comfortable telling one of my trainees about her hair, or like I don't even know if I would be able to think about that to put the bun up, honestly. Um,
No, probably not.
Um, so I just
But
wonder
you
how
could,
you.
but Navid, you could say, is there anything you think you need to do to help you take on that professional image and make you feel more confident? Is there anything you
Mm,
want to do that? And then they on their own might say, yeah, I need to pay attention how I'm sitting. Yeah, I need to sit in a different chair because I want my interns to be on shares of roles so they can move in and out, with the clients they're working with. Or they might say, well, yeah, maybe I should dress up more. They may come up with that on their own, actually, you know.
yeah.
And so her visual cue of seeing herself on video twisting her hair was perfect because she saw it and then she saw what it looked like, what the message was. So, it could be that if you're doing video, those kind of things show up on the screen. And then you can
Yeah.
say, well, what's that feeling like? How does that look to you seeing yourself doing this?
Yeah. How do you think about or kind of engage with kind of the power dynamics in your relationship with trainees?
Yeah, that the power dynamics is kind of, oh, I think that's sometimes difficult. What I try at the beginning, I'm much more directive as a supervisor because there's certain things that they have to follow, and there's certain things I want to get across to them. But they're with me a year, and so that becomes less and less. However, here's a concern. Are they giving me more power than they should?
Mm,
You know? So I'm careful in supervision and not telling them ever what to do. I'll say things like, well, there might be another way, or let me tell you how I handled that when I had this situation.
mm,
So I'm playing one down in some ways. I'm not being directed in a way that says you've got to go in and do that unless there's real danger or something really, like CPS that needs to be reported or
right.
something that's,
Right.
but most of the time I'm saying, well, there's another way, or, I had a similar case and this is what I tried. Yeah. So what I'm thinking about to try, the power stuff is there, and so I don't want to go unconscious about it, but what I'm trying to do is to make it feel like we're more in collaboration.
Yeah, I'm appreciating like the parallel process of supervision as it relates to the clinical work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, of course, the big thing is the isomor. And, the isomor, they're repeating of patterns between intern and family and intern and supervisor. And I spend time talking with them about that. And I'll say, whoa, I'm finding myself kind of getting caught in this too and starting to work too hard. I think maybe, do you think you're working too hard too?
Mm,
And what about that mom? She's also working awfully hard because she's taking over the whole session, so yeah. So we talk about that replication of patterns. So I'm telling them I also have to be aware that an isomor can exist and I don't want to get caught in it either.
right. So in some ways, I don't know if this is the right word. I feel like some people get a little allergic to this word, but in some ways, you're kind of like modeling the ways of like noticing how you're part of a system and how you're kind of
Yes.
like shifting it.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think the truth is, as supervisors, we're modeling all the time.
Yeah.
Even when we're not doing face-to-face supervision, I know they're observing and watching.
What do you mean? Or like,
Well, we're in the clinic, and I know they probably see how I greet clients. They probably are watching how I'm dealing with certain things, issues that
mm,
come up. I think I think interns are absorbing everything. I did. When I
yeah,
was an intern, I
I
was
did. Yeah.
drinking it in. So I think that that's going on. If you're in a clinic setting with your supervisees, I think that's going on all the time, really.
Right.
You know, um, I try to make myself available. I One of the things we're right now in the process of interviewing new interns because the current interns are going to be ending their internship, the 1st of May. So we've selected, we had a bunch of people to interview, but we selected 4. And by we, I mean myself and my other colleague who actually does the supervision of behavioral health. And one of the things I wanted people to know up front is that we're trying our best to create an atmosphere in supervision of total safety.
Mm,
and that I am your safety net. And please make the most of it. And then I tell them, my wish for you, this internship, is that you face the thing you fear the most, whether that's a condition, a problem, a certain family or a certain person. I want that to happen for sure. Why you're here in this internship, because you have lots of safety nets here.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely one of them. We're not, we're going to make sure our goal is to make sure that you grow up to be a successful therapist.
Yeah. I really appreciate that language of like the safety net, and I just find it to be so helpful and important, especially in like just those heavier cases or things that feel intense and like
Yes,
they
and we
have,
have a lot of them.
yeah. And I guess I wonder, like, from your experience, what have you learned as a supervisor that tends to maybe disrupt your position as a safety net, if that makes sense? Like, are there practices? I'm imagining like folks who are listening to this or wanting to be a supervisor or are supervisors and are interested in
Mhm.
being safety nets. What might be disruptive practices as a supervisor to safety?
Oh, you mean a supervisor who would not create a safety net?
Right.
Oh, I think that I've heard from others where they felt like they didn't have safety because a couple things. The supervisor was not available, like they should be,
What do you mean by that?
or pardon?
What do you mean by that?
Well, like I used to supervise LMFT associates, and I would hear them having bad experiences elsewhere because they couldn't get a hold of their supervisor. They they
Uh-huh.
they felt like the supervisor was not available to them, or a supervisor who's not listening to them, not listening to
Mhm.
them. I've heard complaints from interns where they say, well, he's not really or she's not really listening to what I'm saying. They just want to tell
Yeah.
me what to do.
Yes.
Um, so it's it's a supervisor who may be burned out. I don't know, but but they're not. The interns can see that they're not in it with them.
Right.
Maybe that's the way to say it. You know,
Yeah, that tracks for me.
they're not walking the trail or the path with them.
Right. Kind of a little bit more instructive and directive and not
Yeah,
connected.
and,
What is that?
and instruction sometimes is needed in supervision, but if that's all it is, I don't think they're going to learn anything. See, the more I share about my experiences and share with them, my thinking and how I did certain things, offering it to them, not saying you got to go do this, but
Hmm.
offering it to them, I think there's greater learning. And then I remember being in supervision, and I remember I was talking to my supervisor, and we had this brilliant plan laid out. And I could hardly wait to see the family again. It was so exciting. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. But guess what? Walked in the door and the family, dang it, had changed.
Yeah.
So I had to throw all that wonderful supervision out the window. But then I began to realize how that served me is it got me walking in the door with confidence.
Mm.
You see, I was prepared and that made me feel confident.
Yes.
And then it was easy to kind of go, oh, wow, that's already changed since last time. And I could throw it out and just go back to being present again.
Right. Right. Oh, I love that. Or so I like have a bazillion questions. I want to be like mindful of time. I'm gonna like release a little bit of my self-control because I just kind of want to keep asking with your
Well,
permission.
go ahead and ask. I've got time today.
Okay. So, yeah. I guess one of the questions I had you earlier, you brought up CPS and kind of like the context, some of the legal slash ethical context that
Yeah.
we're managing and supporting students and considering. How do you kind of approach ethical dilemmas in your work as a supervisor?
Well, and there's been lots of them. Of course, we have to reflect back on the ethics and law that's tied to those ethics too, and we have to follow the law. But I also know that those kind of things about reporting creates anxiety,
Yeah.
you know, And so, like with CPS, what I learned years ago and how I practiced was if I was going to need to make report on a family, I would tell the family I'm making that report and also invited them to make that report. And also, why you're making that report, let them know you're in family therapy. So then we're back to still making that a collaboration.
Right.
Okay. So because those things scare people and suicide, that scares interns as well. And so, I want to arm them with doing good assessments. And because I'm on site, if ever there's a concern, they text me and I'll show up in the room immediately. And then I can model more how to do that assessment, maybe, you know.
Mm.
For instance, with couples, we do the intimate justice scale. It's kind of a down and dirty thing to make sure there's no IPV, but sometimes it's not clear, And so then they'll text me and it gives me an opportunity to walk in the room and show them how to further assess this.
Right.
Because I don't expect them to have all this in their tool bag yet, and me modeling it hopefully is what's needed for them.
Yeah.
Because, there's a lot of scary things that come into play. One of our issues is we have a lot of divorced families, and of course, we have to get the custody on file. But even then, it can be scary for the intern if you have a mom, and then, I'm saying, we really kind of need to get dad in the door because I'm feeling like we need to get them into a better co-parenting arrangement. And that can be kind of scary. Whoa. I don't know. Do we would get that dad in the door and we'll talk through it and say, well, here's kind of my thinking why we should. Let's engage the other partner in making sure it's okay to do
Right.
that. And if not at first, let's just kind of warm them up to the idea because we're missing some big pieces here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that warming up by the clients is really the warming up of the therapist. You know, oh, yeah, I'm ready now. I can invite him. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
let's get him in the door. Um, so, I think what keeps me in the game is that you never know
Yeah.
what's going to show up, you know? And sometimes I get a little nervous. Am I prepared for what's going to show up? And of course, I reach out to my colleagues and say, hey, this is a new one. What do you think? So I can be the best guide to the interns I'm supervising
Yeah.
too. And I'm pretty honest with them that, there are times that there are families that kind of are intimidating, and I get it. And I also, this is how I break through that, go back and get rapport and charm them. And so I'm pretty honest about my own personal struggles at times so that I'm normalizing that for them because but beginning intern, if they haven't had much experience, whatever they face in the room, they think is abnormal. Oh, I'm a failure. I don't know how to do this. They get panicked. And then if they go into panic, they go into high anxiety, and then I have an anxious intern.
Right. Right. Your commitment and like kind of excitement for supervision is so admirable and just infectious. And I want to just kind of like check into Connie. You had prior to just before we started recording, you were sharing about a book you had published with some of
Oh,
your
yeah.
students.
Yeah. Well, this came in out of having done years and years of supervision. And the case books that have traditionally been written are about the master therapist. And you read their cases and they do this brilliant work and you go, oh, wow. And I got to thinking, we don't really have any case studies where beginning therapists, interns in training have a space to give voice to all their fears and their struggles. So, what I did is I asked a group of interns, and with the help of Dr. Sarah Woods, and Sarah Woods at that time was at Texas Women's University. And so we kind of overlapped with the sharing of interns.
Cool.
Now, since then, she's now director of research at family medicine at UT Southwestern. But at that time, she was there. And so we had this overlap. So I talked to Sarah and I said, this is my idea, but I need you to co-edit with me because I need you to come from that more research or that other framework. And so I invited these interns to write about the case that was the scariest and most difficult for them during their
Mm.
internship. And they did. And I didn't realize how difficult it is to edit a book. I think it's harder than writing it yourself. And I'm sure by the end of it, they were really frustrated with me because I would read their drafts and I say, I remember when, you left out what you were really experiencing back then. Can you fill that in, Because I was trying to get their vulnerability to show on the page. Because I don't think at that time, that was published in 2020, anyone had any books like this, we're just seeing the masters at work. And now I wanted to do this so that it could be utilized by particularly beginning therapists and they could feel not so alone. Because my understanding with all these online courses or programs, a lot of them are feeling isolated.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do this book to help them not feel so alone. Matter of fact, in the first chapter, uh, the intern wrote a beautiful chapter. This was a case where literally she's probably in her late 20s and the couple were in their 50s or early 60s. And her very first session, the wife said to the intern, I just don't think you're old enough to work with us. You don't have any life experience. Wow, what a way to start, huh?
Yeah, it's tough.
So the intern came in and we talked about it. And I said, well, yeah, I appreciate that. But they also knew that they were going to be working with interns. And I said, why don't you go back and handle it this way and let her know you're right. I am young, but I am in training and I am being trained to be a couples and family therapy. This is my career. So I do know some things. So she did that. Luckily, the couple bought it. But then the issues were really tough in this couple's relationship. There had been a suicide of a child. They were on the verge of divorce. It was a lot of issues.
Right.
And matter of fact, in the book, there is a code at one of the top of the pages that will link you to a video that we actually post therapy interviewed that couple as
Oh,
to
wow.
their experience in therapy. And so that's in the book.
Wow, super cool.
And yeah, but the intern was, she kept saying to me, she came back when she found out that there had been a suicide. She came back into me and she admitted that when she was a little girl, her dad had committed suicide. And so she was very stirred up about this. And I sat with her and she looked at me and says, oh, please give this case to somebody else. Please, please, please. And I thought about it. And I thought in my mind, if I do that, I'm giving her the message I don't see her capable. And so I looked at her and I said, you know what? I'm here. I want you to keep the case. I think this is exactly what you're going to need. In this case, you're going to grow from it tremendously. So I'm asking you to stay in the case. She wasn't happy about it, but she continued the case and actually ended up being a brilliant piece of work she did with this couple.
Wow.
At the end, the couple really acknowledged her in the interview, the following interview, about her skill set. And so she grew and learned a lot. But, for a minute, there was a part of me as a supervisor, oh, yeah, I get it. I get it. Should I, I thought maybe I should rescue her and assign it to somebody else. And then I had to sit through it. And we had moments of silence because I was thinking through this and I thought, no, that would be the worst thing I could do for her.
Oh, it's amazing.
She
And
needs
you,
to know that she was competent to see it. And, and it's the same advice I give the interns when they're sitting with families. The only reason I've been a therapist or in the game for all these years is I truly see people whole and complete. They can have the life they want. Now, it may not be the life I want, but they can certainly have the life they want. Because if I did not see the clients I'm working with or the interns I'm working with and supervising as already whole and complete, I would have given up years ago on the profession.
Right.
Because we have to see that in them. And it comes out then.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you maybe supported this therapist and I don't know them, so I don't want to make a bunch of assumptions, but maybe confronting one of the scariest things that might have cropped up in their work. And now
Yes,
it's a
it
point of
was.
competency.
It was. It was. And I think the other layer of that suicide piece, triggered her.
Yeah.
Now, what came out of that for her personally is having done that case successfully. She told me later, you know what? Because I did that, I was able to go home and talk to my mother about
Wow.
this because we had never, and mom never talked with me about the suicide of my dad. And she said, because I did this work with this couple and proved to myself I was competent, I was able to go home and talk to my mom.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah,
Wow.
it really is. It's and there's more and more stories like that with interns, but you know, I I have to walk my talk.
Yeah, and I guess I'm appreciating the story too, Connie, because it beautifully kind of captures the kind of the expansive nature of supervision. Like it extends so far beyond just a therapy room and a training context, and it kind of like has tendrils into our personal lives and our
Hmm.
relationships and the
Hmm.
ways we think about ourselves and our families. So, well, I suppose if you ever have an opening for a supervisee, please sign me up. I'd love to be a participant. Um, yeah, it's been such a pleasure to speak with you today, Connie. I guess as we're wrapping up, I wonder if folks wanted to connect with you or your work or even find the book. Do you have any places
Well,
to send them?
the book is called Case Studies in Couple and Family Therapy Through the Lens of Early Career Professionals, and you can find that on Amazon, actually.
Cool. Great.
And the link for the videotape, which I'm so proud of, the couple happened to be in the film industry, and so they brought in all their fancy equipment, and it's a beautiful video. I mean, it was really
Nice.
cool, and they were so willing to want to share their journey,
Lovely.
and so grateful to them forever for doing that. If you want to find me, you can certainly you can email me at my email address at work, which is connie.cornwell at UT Southwestern, that's all one word, .edu. And I'm be glad to answer any questions or connect with people or talk more about supervision or whatever. I really enjoyed this, Nabed, and I want to thank you for
My pleasure.
having this topic and for me being a part of it because it's good to review these things once in a while. Like,
Mhm.
what is it that we do?
Mhm. Yeah.
How do we
Yeah.
make a difference? Yeah.
Well, it's my pleasure, and my thanks kind of extends to the AFTA community as well. And I know there's a lot of supervisors in our community too, great ones just like yourself. So, kind of excited that they get to hear about all the things you've learned, and thanks for imparting it with me as well.
You're very, very
Uh,
welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much.